Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatchiteshatarane. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Wow, yeah, this section, this doubt, I've been thinking, why anybody has this doubt? Like, if somebody has to create a prison house, it's not that somebody has to be a prisoner. Obviously, only somebody who can create a prison house is the one who is above the laws, above these criminal activities, right? So why these people have doubts about Krishna creating the material world and producing material world and remaining aloof? Why people have difficulty with that, I was thinking. So let's continue. Actually, he is producing the material world from himself and yet remaining aloof from it cannot be understood by logic. That's it. Pause there. So yeah, that's the thing. Even individually, sometimes we can't figure out why certain things are happening in our life by logic. Unless we have faith, many things cannot be actually understood. Why different people have different karmas, why brothers born from the same family have different natures and tendencies, why people growing up in the same neighborhood and same education, they grow up, one grows up to become a bum on the street and somebody else becomes an excellent professor. Why these things? We can't understand by logic in what is in front of us. We need some faith about reincarnation. We need faith to understand that nothing happens by chance. So, and then here though is an analogy to help you understand. So Maitreya is describing an analogy. Let's carefully read this and understand. Maitreya described how the sun creates clouds, rain, and snow by its energy. Yet, none of these affect the powerful sun in any way. Only the living beings are covered by clouds. In the same way, it is only the individual soul who becomes conditioned by the modes of nature because they are minute and weak. However, when we realize the form, knowledge, and bliss of Krishna, they are at once freed from illusion. What then of the Lord himself? Vidhura looked at Maitreya with admiration as the import of his words struck him. The sage had cut right through the senseless speculations which abound many among atheists. How can Krishna be deluded? Vidhura thought of another analogy. A king may enter a prison to inspect it, but he is not himself a prisoner. Similarly, the Supreme King Krishna comes to this world, but he is never under its laws. Yes, said Vidhura, I see that now. Maitreya continued, regarding your question about the suffering of the living entities, this is because they falsely identify with their material bodies. The pure soul dwelling within all bodies never suffers. Vidhura looked doubtful. How could Maitreya deny suffering? Maitreya explained, a man may dream he is being murdered and thus experience great fear and misery. When he wakes up and realizes it was a dream, his distress vanishes. So it is with the soul. We are not the material body. When the body experiences harm, the soul is not harmed. Only while we identify with the body do we experience suffering. This is a relevant thing for yesterday. In Krishna Connection, also we were studying this section. I'm going to send this to the group because we were exactly talking about pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is an option. How long we want to suffer. A man may dream he's murdered. That's like a good analogy. Maitreya looked up at the moon shining brightly in the cloudless night sky. He pointed out to Vidhura how the moon rays sparkled on the gently lapping waters of the river. The Lord is like the moon, and the living beings are like its rays. When the moon is reflected in water, it appears to tremble when the water moves. Similarly, living beings in the bodily concept of life feel distress when the material body is disturbed. But the Lord is never distressed, just as the moon in the sky does not tremble. This made sense to Vidhura. He remembered speaking to warriors who had out-of-body experiences when severely wounded. They recounted hovering above their body and watching as surgeons worked to revive them. But they could see they were different from the body. They were not disturbed. He could understand that suffering is due to false identification with the material body. Oh, so beautiful point there. The warriors. So it's kind of scary image of the warriors hovering around the bodies and watching for the surgeons to bring them back to life. And it's kind of scary, but it proves this point that suffering is due to false identification, the material body. Divining Vidura's thoughts, Maitreya said, the living being's false ego diminishes gradually by Lord Vasudeva's mercy, which he gives to those engaged in bhakti without desire for material remuneration or liberation. Vidura remained doubtful. He had performed bhakti for many years without material desire, yet he still experienced grief. Maitreya reassured him, Krishna sees everything. When our body, mind, words, and possessions, we become exclusively absorbed in his loving service, he becomes pleased. Then he elevates us to transcendence, where our senses are satisfied and no longer troubled by material suffering. That's beautiful. There's this bhajan by Purandaradasa where it says, Ninagu aane ranga ninagu aane ninagu ibbarigu nina bhaktarane tanumanadana vanchakanadare yanage aane. So this in this song, the exact words come. When our body, words, and possessions will become exclusively absorbed in him, in Krishna, then he also becomes, how do you say? He also becomes bound by certain deal, like a contract with us, that if I make a contract that I will not use my body, mind, words, possessions for anything other than pleasure of the Lord, then he also makes a commitment that he will relieve us from material entanglements. He'll give us association of devotees. He will give us intelligence to go to him. He also, it's like a contract deal. I do this, and then the Lord will give me this. Of course, Our actual only thing we need to do is willingness. We need to be willing to let the Lord in and to dedicate our lives to the Lord. In this regard, about being troubled by material suffering, I wanted to bring up what we discussed yesterday in Krishna Connection, how we all kind of belong to the bottle holding group. Bottle means like when there's a glass of water, how heavy could it be, right? I'm holding it, let's say. I'm holding it. And then I may be holding it for 1 hour. I may be holding it for 2 hours, 3 hours. And it's, although the bottle is glass of water is not actually heavy, the longer I hold it, the heavier it feels and the more difficult it gets. So similarly, suffering is like that. Okay, there may be that pain, we may be troubled by our mind, our senses, and this and that. But if we keep holding on to it, there's no ending to that suffering. We just should keep the glass on the down. You keep the glass down. I don't have to keep carrying it. And some people have a mentality like every solution has a problem. Means anything that's nice in life, no, but this, no, but that. So this is material suffering. Material suffering means to go after troubles, to go keep looking for problems, even within solutions. That's the mentality. And yesterday we had such an amazing meeting with so many devotees sharing how this separation between pain and suffering is and how it works for us, each of us in our life. It was amazing. Okay. Where are we? Yeah. Vidhura wondered how conditioned souls could raise their consciousness to the point of exclusive devotional service to Krishna. Understanding his mind, Maitreya said, the easiest and most effective means of elevation is to hear and chant Krishna's names and to discuss his glories. By regularly doing these simple activities, even without spontaneous attraction for Krishna, one will attain relief from unlimited miserable conditions. What to speak of one who hears and chants about Krishna with transcendental love? Such a person can even bring the supremely powerful Lord under his control. Wow. So, nice points. Would you like to continue reading, Rasastali Mataji?
Okay. Vidura's heart was pacified. Remembering his brother Dhritarashtra, he saw the truth of Maitreya's words. The blind king was not accustomed to hear and chant about Krishna, so it was no wonder what he had acted so foolishly. Feeling a surge of compassion, he decided to return to Hastinapur and try to engage Dhritarashtra in the activities of bhakti and thus deliver him from material bondage. With a grateful heart, Vidura said, O powerful sage, O master, all my doubts about the Lord and the living beings are now removed because of your convincing words. I now understand that Krishna is eternally the independent controller and the tiny souls depend upon him. I also now clearly understand that souls suffer because they do not realize their dependence on Krishna and therefore they fail to take shelter of him by the process of hearing and chanting about him. Learned sage, your explanations have greatly helped me. I now realize that everything in Krishna's energy meant for his pleasure. He has created the material world to facilitate the conditioned soul's unlawful desire to usurp his position as the proprietor and enjoyer of everything. By his will, the living beings are deluded by the external energy and thus identify with matter. The only reason they experience misery is because of this false identification. The Lord never suffers because he is never deluded. Indeed, he controls Maya. Images of Duryodhana and his supporters revealing him mocking the Pandavas came to Vidura's mind. He shook his head. Duryodhana was so dull-brained that he could not even recognize that enjoying at others' expense will soon result in the tormentor's own misery. How different were the Pandavas! Seeing Krishna's hand even in adversity, they were peaceful in the face of all kinds of tribulation. Vidura continued, I see now that only two types of people feel happy in the material world. One type are those fools who simply indulge with whims of their mind and senses, unmindful of the danger they face. The others are those who have attained the transcendental position above even material goodness. They are Paramhansas, or the best of swan-like men. Swans can separate milk from water. Similarly, such transcendental devotees can find the means to serve the Lord in every situation. Thus, they are always happy. Everyone else who is neither a complete fool nor transcendentally.
Wow, this is such a nice point. Let's pause here. Just like the swan can separate milk from water, devotees we can always find ways to serve the Lord, to think of the Lord in any circumstance. Wow, this is amazing. So, so nice. I actually have my logo for my consulting thing I have a consulting firm, and the logo is swan.
Oh.
I can show you my site. It's called sriradhagovindadasi.com. And the swan is the, I'll show you.
Okay. That's nice.
See, this is the
Yeah,
swan.
yeah. The new you coaching. Yeah. So nice.
Oh, by the way, I showed you your Guru Maharaj is here on my. So I put here, you see the swan, a symbol of grace and power. And a mixture of water and milk, the swan can separate them and just extract the milk. We need to
Yeah.
learn to detach ourselves from our external circumstances and, like a swan, extract the beauty, the potential growth, and the essential lessons that are offered us at every moment to discover our true self.
Yeah. Really. Really beautiful.
That's why I said, wow, because it's fun and I like the.
Yeah.
Oh, I should not have stopped sharing. We still
Yeah.
are. Uh, yeah, I like this one. It reminds me of, like, it's sitting there peacefully. White swan, right? Indicates purity, indicates power, indicates grace. And then, of course, I was in New Vrindavan in America, West Virginia, and then I saw these swans flying. They can fly, and they look so gorgeous when they fly. Mm. And it's amazing how they have the potency and the capacity to separate milk from water. It's amazing, actually. That's why the great devotees are called Paramahamsas. They are the best, like best of swan-like men. Paramahamsinis, we should call the Vaishnavis. Hamsa and Hamsinis. Hamsas and Hamsinis. Yeah. Okay, please continue. Completely full, nor transcendently situated.
Yeah, will experience various degrees of suffering. Vidura felt that he was in this third category. Krishna recommended that intelligent persons inquire about spiritual truths from self-realized souls like Maitreya. By such inquiry, one will gradually be able to distinguish reality from illusion and progressively rise above material misery. Vidura placed his palms together and said, "My dear sir, I am greatly obliged to you. I know, at least theoretically, understand that material misery is superficial and not interesting to the soul. It is like the suffering one experiences in a dream. I am confident that by serving you, it will be possible for me to gradually give up false identification with matter. Indeed, what is impossible for someone who serves a bona fide spiritual master like yourself, just as the Lord killed the invincible demon Madhu, he also destroys the sufferings of devotees who regularly hear from self-realized souls. When Krishna is fully satisfied with the devotee's sincere efforts to serve his representative, he bestows the highest transcendental ecstasy and attachment for his service. O Master, generally only those who have practiced sufficient austerity get the opportunity to associate with great souls like yourself who are 100% engaged in glorifying the Supreme Lord. As Vidura bowed his head in reverence, it occurred to him that even those who had not practiced austerity are sure to advance in spiritual life if they somehow or other hear from a great soul like Maitreya. Hearing himself glorified, the sage looked down and folded his palms. He was in no way superior to Vidura. Despite being asked by Krishna to instruct him, he knew Vidura was a self-realized soul established in a loving relationship with the Lord. The campfire crackled as the flames leaped up. Looking up at the stars, Vidura desired to learn more about creation. He began by summarizing the key points he remembered. Master, I understand the Lord created the Mahatattva, from which he manifested the Virat Rupa with senses and sense organs. Then he entered that universal form. The original Purusha incarnation lying in the casual ocean in Karnodakshay Vishnu, his expansion, Garbhodakshay Vishnu manifests the Virat Rupa with many legs and hands in which all the planets and their inhabitants exist. You describe how these are 10 life airs in the universal form, along with three energies which generate the mind and the controlling gods, the bodily senses and physical elements. You also describe how the Virat Rupa manifests the senses and sense objects. Maitreya smiled in acknowledgement of Vidura's accurate recall of his teachings. Vidura said, O great sage, kindly now describe the Lord's energies in more detail. I have heard that the Prajapatis, who are one of these energies, assisted by their sons, grandsons, and their daughters, progeny, populated the entire universe with all species. Now I would like to know how the first progenitor, Brahma, brought into being the Manus, the lord of the Manvantara periods. Please speak about the Manus and their descendants. O son of Mitra, please also tell me which planets are situated above the earth and which are beneath it, along with their measurements, including that of the earth itself. Please describe the various species, including celestials, humans, those born of the embryo of perspiration and from eggs, and also the varieties of plants and vegetables. How were they all generated and distributed throughout the worlds? As Vidhura spoke, still more questions came to his mind. During his long pilgrimage, as many sages and philosophers he had encountered all described material creation differently. None of their explanations had satisfied Vidura. Now that he had the opportunity to inquire from a self-realized devotee of Maitreya's caliber, he was keen to hear his authoritative explanation. Vidura continued, I am also eager to learn more about Krishna's material incarnations in the in the modes of nature, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, as well as about the Lord's spiritual incarnations and his magnanimous activities. O great sage, kindly also speak about the varnas and ashramas into which human society is divided. I would like to understand their symptoms and behavior, in particular, their character in terms of their levels of mind and sense control. I am also eager to learn about the births of the great sages and the different categories of Vedic scriptures. Kindly also explain the sacrifices recommended in the scriptures. I am especially keen to understand the regulations governing the paths of Ashtanga, Sankhya, and Bhakti Yoga. Thinking again of his numerous meetings with theoretical philosophers, Vidra said, in my travels I have heard many faithless atheists. Please describe the imperfections and contradictions inherent in their arguments. I would also like to know of the social impact of children born from prathaloma relationships. Kindly also explain the destinations of living beings according to the work and the qualities they cultivate in their current life. Please describe how, by living a religious life, one can naturally achieve wealth, sense gratification, and ultimately liberation. Kindly explain the different scriptural rules meant to be followed by each Varna. O Brahmin, please explain how the Shraddha rites for one's deceased relatives should be performed, as well as how Pitraloka, where one's pious ancestors dwell, are created. I am also curious to know how time is measured in the different planets. Please describe the results of giving charity, performing austerity, and executing community service such as digging wells. I would also like to know the duties prescribed for a person away from his home, as well as those of a person in a distressed situation. O sinless one, since the Supreme Lord is the controller of all living beings, everyone should try to please him, whether they desire material benefit or divine love, prema. Kindly therefore describe how the Lord can be fully satisfied. Vidura had heard many fallacious theories but could not remember them all. He therefore said, O best of the Brahmins, there are many subjects which are beneficial to understand that I may have neglected to ask about. A spiritual master like yourself is very kind. Therefore, please instruct me in all topics helpful to my spiritual advancement, even if I have not mentioned them. As he spoke, other questions came to mind relating to misconceptions he had previously heard. Remembering how certain philosophers advocated that all jivas were actually one with Krishna and merged back into him at the time of destruction, losing their individuality, he asked, Master, I am curious to know about the universal dissolutions. How many types are there? Are all living beings destroyed along with the universe? Or do some survive to serve the Lord whilst he sleeps? Please also explain the truths regarding the identities and relationships of the individual souls and Krishna, as well as those portions of the Upanishads which describe these subjects. What are the qualifications of a genuine spiritual master to fit to disseminate such knowledge, and of the disciple who can receive the teachings? Maitreya raised an eyebrow in surprise and laughed, as if to say, "You are asking a lot of questions." I was about to ask the same question. So many questions. Yeah. Vidura blushed slightly. Master, there are many inexperienced people who advocate self-realization without the help of a spiritual master. They think it impossible, it possible to understand truth by speculation. But I have heard that learned pure devotees do not approve of conjecture. They say it is only possible to become detached from this world and rise to the spiritual platform of loving service to the Lord with the guidance of an authorized spiritual master like yourself. My dear sage, I have asked all these questions because I want to understand the principles which will enable me to attain Krishna's transcendental loving service. You are a kind friend to all souls who have lost their way in this world due to bad association. Therefore, kindly instruct me. Vidura placed his head at Maitreya's feet.
Okay, we'll pause there for today. So many questions.
I know. So many.
Imagine if Vidura has so many questions. What about us?
Yeah. He's
But
going to answer it one by one?
what? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But it's nice that he has asked all this so that he can understand the principles which can help him attain Krishna. So we may say, why so many questions? Because a devotee likes to understand the principles which will enable us to attain Krishna's loving transcendental service.
Today I'll write them on the paper, all the questions.
I also was thinking the same thing, that we should remember.
Yeah.
Because as and when it gets answered, we can refer back to the questions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rasastali Mataji.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was very nice. Thank you.
Okay. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय.
Yay.
All the questions of Vidura ki jai.